Free.
That's Chris as a 15-year-old standing in the Rocky Mountains. He started lifting weights at the age of about 13 in the basement, and he would not go out. If the guys called and said, come on out and hang out, he'd say, no, gotta lift my weights.
Even at age 13, Chris Benoit already knew what he wanted to be.
It was really a passion, and he wanted to be a professional wrestler.
Michael Benoit did not share that passion, but he loved his son. The weights were a present for Chris.
I dread the time that I even bought the weight set. You look back in your life and look at the mistakes you've made. That was the biggest mistake I ever made.
Young Benoit's passion turned to obsession. He grew stronger, bigger, and on weekends, he would convince his father to let him drive the 3 hours from his home in Edmonton, Alberta, to Calgary, the very heart of Canada's wrestling empire.
He really thought a fellow by the name of the Dynamite Kid, that became his idol, and really his wrestling style, he really followed the Dynamite Kid.
Looking back, Mike Benoit believes allowing Chris to idolize the Dynamite Kid was an even bigger mistake.
It started with the verbal abuse and, putting me down in front of other people.
Michelle Smadou was just a teenager when she met and fell in love with Tom Billington, the Dynamite Kid. They married, had a child, and soon after, Michelle says the Dynamite Kid began to explode.
He certainly wasn't the guy you fell in love with.
No. He was the gentleman that kicked out his wife and 3-week-old baby.
And do you blame it all on the steroids?
Yes.
Tom Billington came to Canada from Manchester, England to become a pro wrestler. Like Chris Benoit, Billington was a small man in a big man's ring.
For the first time, they were allowing a smaller person to come in and take those top spots. The bigger he got, the more fame he gained, the more in demand he was.
From Canada, the Dynamite Kid moved up to McMahon's WWF. He became one half of the British Bulldog tag team, but behind the scenes, he was crumbling.
The steroids started, the drug use, prescription drugs, because of the injuries, which also starts with the alcohol.
Michelle says at home the kid was out of control, at one time dragging her by the hair, holding a gun to her face.
It became so bad that I just wanted to get out, and the way I was going to get out was I put my 2 children on the bed, the master bed, Bronwyn and Merrick, and Tom had a lot of guns, so I went to get his gun. And I wanted to shoot Bronwyn and Merrick, and then myself. And the only reason I didn't do it is because I couldn't guarantee that we would all die.
Michelle never told her husband what you have just heard. The night before this interview, she finally told her children.
I can't imagine how tough that was to tell them. Did they look at you differently?
Well, there was a lot of tears, and we didn't say anything. It was a quiet acceptance. They know that something horrible went on during the marriage.
The marriage ended in 1991 when Michelle bought her husband a one-way ticket from Canada back to Manchester, England. This is the Dynamite Kid today. Tom Billington now lives in a public housing apartment outside Manchester. He has lost the use of his legs. A pin sticks out from one of his toes. He readily admits wrestling did this to him. Wrestling and the fact he ignored doctors who told him to stop.
I needed the money. I went back to wrestling because I needed the money.
The other British bulldog, partner Davy Boy Smith, his younger cousin, died of a heart attack at age 39. Billington, who was only 48 years old, says he might have suffered the same fate were it not for a drug overdose that led a doctor to discover an enlarged heart.
So he said he's enlarged from taking steroids. So he said, don't take steroids again, you'll be okay. So anyway, I've never touched the steroids since 1991. Well, before then I did regular, you know, for years.
In fact, he says, for years, many of McMahon's wrestlers took steroids. The bigger the physique, the bigger the promotion.
I took it for the job. Because I was in the WWF, most of them was all big men. So I thought, well, I'll do it too.
Billington says the steroids came from doctors, from friends, even steroids meant for horses. He took them all, took a terrible pounding in the ring, and like his now dead partner, began taking extensive amounts of painkillers.
My back, my knees, oh Christ, my shoulder, different things. Yeah, I took painkillers.
Tom Billington has never laid eyes on a 16-year-old daughter, born after his marriage broke up. He remains bitter about Michelle, saying she's brainwashed his children. He does admit holding a shotgun to her head, but insists he was not violent.
I don't think it was violent. I mean, I put a shotgun under her chin once, but I had no shells. I only pretended that.
This is the man Chris Benoit idolized. Shortly after Benoit's death, a British newspaper quoted the Dynamite Kid, harshly criticizing Benoit. "We've all been through it," Billington is quoted, "but we didn't take it out on our loved ones." He told us maybe it was the drugs.
It can make you aggressive, the steroid. But I don't, well, personally, I wouldn't, you don't go and kill your bleeding kid, would you? Or wife, whatever.
Coming up, new revelations about Chris Benoit's death and the Benoit family's search for answers.
I said to my wife, I said, it's our only hope.
At his home outside Edmonton, Mike Benoit was in mourning. It was 4 days after his son's family was found dead in their Fayetteville, Georgia home. The headlines declared his son a suicidal murderer. But why? Mike Benoit didn't know where to begin.
I called a funeral parlor in Atlanta to pick up his remains, and we were going to have him cremated. So I was in the process of making those arrangements when I got a call from Chris Nowinski.
Chris Nowinski is a former WWE wrestler who left the business in 2003 after suffering multiple concussions. He founded the Sports Legacy Institute, an organization that explores the dangers of undiagnosed concussions in sports. Nowinski was calling because he wanted a piece of Chris Benoit's brain.
So that they could do some tests to see if there was any signs of brain damage. I said to my wife, I said, it's our only hope. And I really knew in my heart that because this isn't the son that we knew and loved.
Through cooperation from the Benoit family, we have had the opportunity to examine the brain tissue obtained from the autopsy of Christopher Benoit. You see these brain cells here.
In September, the Institute held a news conference in New York to release its findings. Chris Benoit, the researchers announced, had the brain of an elderly Alzheimer's patient.
This is a normal example on the left. It's smooth, it has the round cells. Christopher Benoit's brain, you see the projections, the connections here.
The slides reveal severe damage throughout all regions of his brain tissue, attributable to multiple undiagnosed concussions.
I think that these extensive changes throughout his brain, to me, and I think the others in our organization believe that it is enough to very likely explain aberrant behavior, including suicide and even homicide.
While other doctors have been more cautious about linking brain damage to violent behavior, the Institute's finding was the answer Mike Benoit needed, and it turned his grief into anger.
Because the last paragraph said it's because of the nature of the way Chris wrestled that this is why he sustained the brain injuries. So they were basically blaming my son for this.
Like the Dynamite Kid he idolized, Chris Benoit was a wrestler's wrestler. Small in stature, he made up for it with soaring maneuvers, including his trademark, the flying headbutt. Chris Kanyon says Benoit would take the abuse for the love of the show.
So me and him wrestled each other a bunch of times, and it was never about what can I do to you to make me look good. It was what can we do together to make the match look good.
And looking good meant taking real hits to the head. Although the McMahons are aware of some of the Institute's findings, they say they have not yet studied the report.
These studies, have not been, they've not been proven, if you will.
Haven't been even critiqued by other members of the scientific community.
As a result, McMahon is moving with caution.
The only thing we've done really is, from a conservative standpoint, is just don't use chairs to the head. But other than that, it's what it is in the ring. Accidents do occur. It's not ballet, as they say.
He did have some kind of brain injury, to get back to that point. I would think from a business standpoint, Mr. McMahon, you would be concerned about that, if you are concerned about your wrestlers.
There's no question we are. We're concerned about everything. But again, you're frying me with facts, if they are facts, that are after the fact.
The fact is, there is mounting evidence across all sports that multiple concussions can have devastating consequences. But McMahon just doesn't buy that concussions drove his former champion to kill.
The findings themselves stated Chris Benoit had the brain of an 85-year-old man with dementia. And I would suggest to you